Thank you for joining the JB Show live on the Fred Hampton Leftist Network. My name is James, or as you guys know, is JB Font. We are live today with my fellow Fred Hampton co-host, Nick, and we have a very special guest. I am extremely excited today. We have Richard Medhurst today. Did I pronounce your last name correct, please?
Yes, absolutely. It's that's what
Okay.
the French do it the worst, and I had to do that at school. So you did it fine, brother.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
It's my pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really honored to be on the show. Really.
Yeah, well, that's humbling for me. Thank you. Um, you are the host of, your own network that's available on YouTube and Rockfin. And also make sure to follow his Patreon. It's Richard Medhurst. And one of the reasons why I brought you on today is because you're extremely versed on foreign policy, especially from a left perspective. And that's something that I think that a lot of us, especially on the left here in the United States, need to brush up on because foreign policy, especially from our perspective, we have to realize that it affects us in deep ways for the most part.
Yeah.
One of the things that we wanted to discuss was the issue with Israel and Palestine. Now, as someone who's a bit of a layman when it comes to this particular issue, I gave this example on our live show on Thursday, and I'm going to give the example to you, and I'm going to see if it kind of squares the circle with what you, as more of a foreign policy expert, knows about Israel and Palestine. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay. So, as many people know, the United States was originally, had people who were natives, indigenous Americans that lived on this continent. And so the colonialists, the British settlers that came to the United States to establish colonies, came here and essentially they kicked either the indigenous out of their homes or they killed them off.
Yep.
So for the colonialists, for somebody to say that Israel has a right to defend itself, that's like saying that the colonialists that came to this country to kick the indigenous Americans out, that's like saying, oh, well, the colonialists have a right to defend themselves when they're the ones who came to this land and tried to kick the indigenous people out of their own home.
Yeah.
Did I have at least a simplistic summation of what is going on in Israel and Palestine?
I couldn't have said it better myself. You gave the most. It's literally the perfect analogy, and I wouldn't even say it's an analogy. It's just a repetition, but with different actors, right? It's okay. The same thing. And by the way, I want to say another thing is that people love, especially the media, they love to portray what's happening in Palestine as a complicated issue. It's not complicated. It's really as simple as you put it. It does not get simpler than that. The vast majority of Palestinians, alive today, they're either living as refugees in Palestine on their own land, right? They've been kicked out of their homes, sent to other cities, other villages, other settlements, and the rest of them are in a diaspora. They've left Palestine. So you have millions who went to Jordan, which is just next door. You have millions who went to Syria, right? My cousin himself is half Syrian, half Palestinian. Why is he half Palestinian? Because his grandfather was kicked out of his home. He was forced to leave in the Nakba, they call it. The Nakba means the disaster, the catastrophe. And this is in 1948. Mm-hmm. So, he's one of them, right? So you have millions of Palestinians who've either been kicked out of Palestine or kicked out of their homes inside of Palestine. And then you have settlers, Jewish settlers who've come from all over the world. Like even today, there is a law in the Israeli entity that says that if you are Jewish, you could be a Jewish American, a Jewish Brazilian. It doesn't matter where you are. You have a so-called right to return because they say that they're the descendants of the Hebrews and that therefore this land is their land, and any Jewish person has the right to go there to claim their nationality, the Israeli nationality, and to just live where a Palestinian lived, right? But we never talk about the right to return of Palestinians who are still alive today. There are Palestinians who still have the keys to their houses. 1948 is not that long ago, right? This is 2 generations we're talking about. And they of course, they have no right to return. And when they do protest, they do marches like in 2018, 2019. I mean, if you have seen maybe this movie from Abby Martin, which is called Gaza Fights for Freedom, you had Palestinians every Friday after the mosque prayers, they would go and they would just peacefully protest at the border. They want to go back to their homes, right? That's why they're called the right to return marches. And the Israelis just shot at them. And if you go look up this article in Haaretz, which is this Israeli newspaper, there's even a sniper bragging about how he shot 42 knees in one day, right? Like he's bragging about crippling Palestinians. This is what the U.S. military, the U.S. gives in military aid to the Israelis, right? So the current package was signed in 2016, I believe. 2016, and it's over 10 years. So $38 billion total, $3.8 billion every year. And that's military aid, right? And just in December, you had, I think, another 500 million going for missile defense. So there's always these little things that give, even in the Heroes Act during the pandemic, they gave like 2.5 million to some nonprofit called Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces. So they're always getting money on top of the military aid. And this is, of course, what the United States subsidizes. So it's very important that you made this connection, this very real connection between, what happened to the natives, what happened to the indigenous, the real actual Americans, the legitimate Americans, when the British settlers, the Dutch settlers, the Spanish settlers wiped them out, committed genocide against them. And what is happening now? And it's just as absurd when one says that Israel has the right to defend themselves. What about Palestinians? They don't have a right to defend themselves on their own land? Like, you got to understand something, man. I went to school with people who would vacation in Israel, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, my own cousin has never seen Palestine, and you just go on vacation there. Like, it's like the world is upside down. It's such an absurdity. And of course, Palestinians, when we talk about that, they try to frame them as terrorists, not resistance fighters, right? Because it's much easier to invalidate their cause. And they try to make it about Hamas. Hamas was founded in the 80s, right? The Palestinian cause is much older than the 1980s. So that's number one. And of course, they call anyone who's a resistance fighter a terrorist, because if we call them resistance fighters, then people would be asking, well, hold on, what are they resisting? And then, of course, you would have to talk about the reality, which is that Israel is an occupying power. They're an occupation force. So yeah, that was a bit of a long answer, but I hope I was able to give some insight.
Sure.
One of the reasons, if you mind, JB, one of the reasons why we discuss the issue of Israel-Palestine a lot on this show, and the reason why it's so dear to me, there's been a long-standing tradition, almost, of solidarity among African-American, Palestinian, and South Africans as well. I noticed there's kind of a divide and conquer that I see Zionists and liberals play as well, where they're trying to make it like an oppression Olympics. But we are the Fred Hampton leftists here, and a lot of people don't know there's been decades and decades that goes backward. The Black Panthers show solidarity with the Palestinian people. Nelson Mandela famously was staunchly pro-Palestine, and he even said at one of his speeches and praising the Palestinian people because there's a moral right now. George Floyd and a lot of them speak on police violence that's going on in the African American community, because it's easy for us to relate our struggles with the struggle of the Palestinian people. And Mandela even said that Palestinians stood with South Africans not only in rhetoric, but in material goods and resources. So that's why I think it's very easy for us to connect with this issue, because if you're Black or if any disenfranchised community, any indigenous community, and you don't see the connection between what the Zionist Israel is doing and what's happening to our community, I think you've been very short-sighted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even Nelson Mandela even said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think the quote goes something like, the world will not know freedom until Palestine knows freedom. I believe that's the quote. And as you mentioned, there's a long history of solidarity. That's why I love that you called your show Fred Hampton leftist. First of all, just because of who Fred Hampton was, but that you also invited me on to talk about this because there is a real history there. And of course, the cause of Black liberation, the civil rights movement, this is its own cause in its own right, the Palestinian in its own right. But there is a lot to be said about movements having solidarity internationally. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and people can relate. And ironically, this because you mentioned George Floyd, people pointed this out last year that you have Israelis who train U.S. police departments, and one of the things that I've seen so often in Palestine, and they do this every day, is they put the knee on the neck on Palestinians, right? And I mean, that's what we saw Chauvin do to George Floyd. And I don't know if particularly the Minneapolis Police Department trains with the Israelis. I don't know, but there is something to be said because this is an actual program. And the U.S. subsidizes Israel, so there's a big relationship going on there between we have common oppressors, so to speak.
I'm glad you brought this up because there's one thing I want to add, and I'll toss it right back to you, JB. Because funny enough, to show you the connection between American policing and how the IDF and Israeli police act, they did an ICC probe into American police and how they treat African Americans. This is very recent, and this ICC probe, which once again wasn't reported by even like independent news media, like we make sure we cover it and we make sure it's a giant focus of our show. But the ICC probe into American policing and Black Americans found that the way American police treat African Americans constitute a crime against humanity and violates international law. So then the ICC tried to do a probe on Israel-Palestine, and guess who blocked it? Joe Biden. So all these things connect. So then, as you mentioned before, there's a long-standing tradition of American police and Israeli soldiers trained together. So you can see how their treatment of Palestinians connect directly to how American police treat African Americans because they get the same ideology called killology. And there's a famous, I always forget this guy's name. It's not that hard to find out.
It was Daniel something.
Absolutely.
It's Dave Grossman. There we go. Dave Grossman is a very, very famous police state advocate. I don't know what to call him, but he wrote this book called Killology that pretty much trains soldiers and police officers to be desensitized to killing, teaches them techniques in certain situations where they should apply killing. The Israeli soldier and their police, they go through that same training as well. So I'm glad you brought that up because all this stuff really does connect, and that's what we want to emphasize on our show. I'll pass it back to JB and Richard.
It's actually interesting that you brought that up about Joe Biden. There's I'm actually going to share my screen here, and hang on.
I can see it now.
Go.
Yeah, I see your screen now. Wow.
Okay, perfect. This is an article from Truth Out. It says Biden administration reportedly blocking UN ceasefire statement as Israel bombards Gaza. And this is basically speaking about how the Biden administration, it says the Biden administration is reportedly blocking release of a United Nations Security Council statement calling for an immediate ceasefire as Israel continues its devastating assault on the occupied Gaza Strip, killing dozens of Palestinians and injuring hundreds more.
Yeah.
So this actually this ties in what you and Nick were saying as far as the Zionist genocidal type of ideology that is shared between people like Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden, as well as every other American president that we've had, basically, and that they don't even want the Palestinian people to have a ceasefire because it's almost like, and I liken it to a police officer shooting an unarmed man, and then as soon as the police officer shoots the unarmed man and sees that they're down on the ground, then to make it look like they're okay, that they're the good guy, they immediately call
Yeah.
for the ambulance. Oh my God, we need an ambulance to save this person's life. And it's
Yeah.
like, but wait, you just shot the guy up.
Exactly.
Like the deed is already done. And so Biden
Yeah.
suddenly now is like, okay, yeah, we need a ceasefire. You already did the deed.
Exactly, exactly, I'm very glad you brought that up because he did that three times. There are three times in the last 2 weeks where the U.S. blocked a statement. It's not even like a mandate. It's just a statement saying we call for a ceasefire, and because it has language condemning Israel, he won't have it. Right.
Mhm.
So, in order to understand the relationship between Israel and the United States, you also need to look at the UN, which is unfortunately a biased institution, right? I mean, there are a lot of good people working there, but it cannot function as long as you have veto power, and it's sitting especially with former colonial powers like the UK and the US, and France. So I mean, the Israel benefits from 3 seats on the UN Security Council, essentially, permanent seats, I should say, because as long as the United States is there, as long as the UK is there, as long as France is there, they're always going to side with Israel, but especially the United States, right? The UK helped create Israel, and the US, of course, like many of the UK's atrocities, they just passed on the torch and they run with it, right? So, I mean, it's really telling how the Israelis, by lobbying inside the United States to crush any kind of pro-BDS movements or pro-Palestinian movements, they control the narrative, the discourse. They make up the confines within which you can talk about Israel, right? Any criticism is off limits, whether it's at the UN Security Council or on a college campus, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't want people questioning the nature of what Israel is, that this is a settler colonialist project, right?
Yeah.
It has its roots in racism. It has its roots in Jewish supremacy, and it's born out of the ashes of the British Empire. The British and the French, they use the Arabs, especially the British, they used the Arabs for the Arab revolt to get rid of the Ottomans. And they promised them, they made these fake promises of independence, right? But as soon as they got rid of the Turkish Empire after World War I, the French and the British, they start carving up the Middle East like it's a cake, right? It's literally a bunch of white men sitting around a table with rulers and pencils and just deciding, yeah, you can have this, I'll have this, we'll share this. And they did the same thing with Africa, right? So they just carved this up. And then in 1917, of course, you had the Balfour Declaration saying that, yeah, Britain will help create a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And then, after 47, 48, you have the end of the British Mandate, which is a nice word of saying colony. And then they just left. They handed it over to the UN, and the UN proposes this partition plan. I mean, you always hear people say, oh, yeah, the Palestinians should have just accepted the partition plan. The Arabs should have just accepted the partition plan. Look, man, why should, if someone comes into your house and takes half of your house, why should you accept having half of your land? I don't understand what kind of a compromise. That's not a compromise. That's insulting. And they always look back and say, yeah, you see, the Arabs, they should have just accepted this. No, they shouldn't. No, they absolutely should not have accepted that shit. And so the UN, unfortunately, both my parents worked in peacekeeping. Like I said, there's a lot of people working in the UN who have good intentions. Unfortunately, though, the institution itself, it has failed to stop conflict. It has failed to, prevent conflict, and it's extremely biased. I do not understand how it can function properly when you have the United States, the United Kingdom, and all of them, all five. So Russia, China, France, UK, US, with permanent seats and veto power in the UN Security Council. This fundamentally undermines the entire thing. So, it's no surprise. And by the way, there are multiple UN resolutions telling Israel that its settlements are illegal. It has to withdraw from Gaza and the West Bank and the Syrian Golan Heights. They never listened. It's never enforced at all. Israel is above international law. It's above humanitarian law. It's above any ICC probes. And by the way, you guys mentioned the ICC. I'm sure you remember just a few months ago how they lost it when the ICC said that it's going to investigate war crimes in Palestine. I mean, Netanyahu tried to come out and say that this is anti-Semitic, and that it's against Israel. First of all, the ICC investigates people, like a general or a politician, not countries, right? So the ICC just said it's going to extend jurisdiction to Palestine. I mean, again, the fact Palestine is not a country or not a state according to the UN, and but Israel is. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. But the Israelis, they made a gamble. they thought, okay, so if we're not part of the ICC, they can't prosecute us for war crimes, and we'll make sure the Palestinians can't get statehood. And then we'll be immune from war crimes, because you need either the aggressor or the victim to be a member of the Rome Statute. And the IC was like, well, hold on, actually, you know what? We will consider Palestinian territory as under our jurisdiction. And then they lost it. So, it's really telling how they're above all international law. They're above all humanitarian law. They just do whatever they like. And the dehumanization that goes on in Palestine, I mean, it's they have like separate streets, like that only Jews can walk on. Like, I mean, it's insane. It's really insane. They are committing some of the worst atrocities in broad daylight in 2021, and people just conveniently sweep it under the rug and then say that if you resist, you're a terrorist. It's just, you can't make this shit up.
I'm glad. I'm so
sorry,
glad.
I don't know if I can cuss, but
I said no. You're all good. You're all good. Speak your truth, brother. But I'm glad that you brought the UN because I have a lot of issues, just as you laid out as well. And I remember the story, and Biden is just a shrewd politician. You know how I manipulate the media, and there's many examples of this. This is just another one. I remember he got a lot of praise at the time because him and Anthony Blinken made an announcement that they're going to rejoin the UN Human Rights Council that Trump pulled out of. And then there was he got a lot of love for this, even from people that are left of center, and it would drive me crazy because when that story came out, they was open about what they were trying to accomplish. Blinken said they had a lot of criticism of the UN Human Rights Council, so they want to rejoin it to make it better. What was their criticism of the UN Human Rights Council? They said the UN Human Rights Council was infested with anti-Semitism because they treat Israel too harshly. And this is what they didn't report when this story came out. So they rejoined the UN Human Rights Council to protect Israel. And that's what they said. They said they want to protect Israel from human rights probes, and that's why they got in. And also to back up JB's point earlier, that kind of showed how this ceasefire is a fraud. And this is a long-standing strategy that the U.S. and Israel implements over time, where they allow Israel to steal Palestinian land, and then they like, oh wait, ceasefire. To let me know, this is from Axios. This came out midnight. This is a tweet from Greg Carlstorm. He's a Middle East correspondent. He said Biden language on Gaza was aligned with Israel's timetables. His call for de-escalation came after the Israeli army started to signal towards their U.S. counterparts on Wednesday that the operation achieved its primary objectives. And when the ceasefire was announced, Joe Biden blocked it for the 5th time, I believe, the day before it was actually announced. And this kind of backs that up, right? Because this is the pattern. I want to get your thoughts on this, Richard, because their pattern is they allow Israel to commit insane war crimes so they can grab land back, steal Palestinian homes. And then once they get their operation completed, they're like, oh, ceasefire. See, we stand for Palestinian people too. You see the strategy as well, Richard?
Absolutely. 100%. They're just buying time. They're just trying to, do smoke and mirrors, right? So they talk the talk, and even when they make statements, they're still showing their bias. Of course, they say like, yeah, Israel has the right to defend itself, but apparently not Palestinians, right? And then they just buying time. And you said that they did it 5 times now. I mean, I'm losing count, right? But this is all the time. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting also to see where the orders are coming from, right? Because, every U.S. president, as you guys have pointed out, every U.S. president is subservient to Israel. This is like, you might get a Republican or a Democrat and they might differ on some domestic issues. But man, when it comes to the empire, that is unwavering. Joe Biden himself has said, I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. That's word for word what he said. He is proud of that, right? So, they have no issue with taking orders from Israel. Because Israel, one of the main reasons Israel wants the United States as a protector, as an ally, is not just the military aid. Especially now, I mean, if we're talking in the 1950s, yes, you could really make an argument about how crucial the military aid was, and that's actually why Israel was able to go against the Arabs, right? They didn't do it by themselves. But now in 2021, I mean, Israel is very advanced. I mean, they could probably go it alone. But the UN, my point is, going back to my point is, it's not just the military, it's having someone on the UN Security Council to do these things, exactly what you just pointed out, to buy them time, to make them look good in the Human Rights Council, before the UN Security Council. I mean, it's a farce, unfortunately. You know, it really sucks that something like an institution that is meant for, you know, diplomacy, for peace, for cooperation, is being abused and ridiculed. And this is just one example, unfortunately, of many examples. And by the way, just about the Human Rights Council, if I'm not mistaken, I think Saudi Arabia was chairing it for a few years. I mean, dude, like, women couldn't even drive there. Like, what is that? You know, I mean, really, I'm just astonished, man. I'm just astonished.
Yeah. One of the things that I brought out on the Thursday live shows, and I'll say it again, supporting boycott, divestment, and sanctions, aka BDS, against Israel is not anti-Semitic. Just like and I actually do support boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Saudi Arabia, but does that make me Islamophobic or hateful of people who are worshipers, you know, of Islam? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No.
Aren't Palestinians Semitic anyway?
Yes.
So why would it be anti-Semitic to be pro-Palestinian?
They've co-opted the word, right? They've turned it into something where they have stripped Arabs of their own identity, right? Because, you know, just even language-wise, Hebrew and Arabic are both Semitic languages. They both come from the Semitic family. They have their roots in Aramaic. You know, these are really old languages. There are so many common words, even that you know, one. Not, I mean, it's not, they're not that close, but you have common words. Just to give you an example, and as you said, I mean, of course, Palestinians are Semites. I mean, all Arabs are Semites. Like, you know, the thing is, they want to make it look like it's a religious issue, or it's not a religious issue. Like, if you go and talk to an Arab Christian like me, or you talk to an Arab Muslim or an Arab Jew, they all have the same position on Palestine, which is, you know, get off Palestinian land and stop oppressing Palestinians.
I'm glad
and one thing I want to say is that you had a lot of Jews, European Jews, emigrating to Palestine, you know, even before World War II, right? So, I mean, if they were emigrating there, why? And it's not safe. Why would they go there? You know, if there's supposedly this deep hatred between Arabs and Jews. This is such nonsense, man. You know, in the city where I'm born, in Damascus, in the capital of Syria, you have even a Jewish ghetto, a Jewish quarter. My cousin is born there. My mother is born there. My auntie is born there. My uncle is born there. My other uncle is born there. You know, they grew up with Jews and Palestinians in the same neighborhood, like literally neighbors. But they want to come here and convince us that, oh yeah, Jews hate Arabs and vice versa. I do not accept this bullshit. I don't know.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
I'm not, I don't, like, it's not something I've seen. I don't accept that or tolerate that, right? They want to come here, convince me that this is a racist issue, or it's like something about Arabs and Muslims hating Jews. Complete bullshit. That's nothing to do with it. This is an anti-imperialist issue. This is an anti-colonial issue. This is a human rights issue. Palestinians need to be treated with dignity. They need to have their homes given back to them, their land given back to them, and stop being persecuted. It is that simple. It's that simple. And BDS, you know, they go to colleges, they lobby institutions, even entire states, to try and outlaw BDS because they want to control the narrative again, right? They don't want you to actually look at Israel as an occupation, but instead as a legitimate state. You know, they want to legitimize these settlements and this colony as a state, as a country, so that you never see the situation for what it really is, which is you have oppressors and oppressed. You have colonizers and people who are colonized. And that's very important. And, you know, BDS is the most peaceful. It's the most, nonviolent opposition that you could possibly undertake towards Israel. So if they're telling you can't even do that, I mean, what avenue do they leave you, right? What recourse do they leave you? But this, again, it's all part of the strategy, right? BDS is anti-Semitic. If you criticize Israel, you're an anti-Semite. If the Palestinians take up arms, they are terrorists. Yeah, you know, it's you can't criticize Israel. That's how it is.
Yeah, let me just say this, and I'll pass it right to you, JB, because whenever people use anti-Semitism as a shield to defend the apartheid state of Israel, it drives me crazy, and I'll tell you why. Because I can only relate to all the experiences as a black man. That's what we do on the show. So I tell people if I see people, especially white liberals, who attack allies and call them racist because they go after Barack Obama and his war crimes, that drives me crazy. That pisses me off because I think Barack Obama has done a tremendous amount of damage, not only just internationally, but to the black community. So they're weaponizing our real struggle of white supremacy against the black community to shield the oligarchs. And that's essentially what happened with what you lay out with anti-Semitism. And I have a ton of Jewish allies who are pro-Palestine because that's the pro-human position.
There you go.
It's just that simple. Go ahead, JB.
Yeah. We're gonna have to cut it short today because I know, Richard, you have to get going in a little bit.
It sucks because I'm really having a good time, man. I keep going for hours. Really,
I know, and this is the thing. I'm loving this conversation.
It's just an excuse to do it again, right? So there you go.
Perfect. One of the last thoughts that I want to say, and this is to all my Black people out there. Okay, anybody that is a Black person, especially living in the United States, you need to care about this issue.
Yes.
The issue was going on between Palestinians and Israelis is no different than the issue that's going on between us and the police state that's here, that whenever we have someone that is shot, killed, someone that is lynched, it is not only happening to us, but it's happening to abroad. And if we stand against it here in the United States, we need to stand against it abroad. And what people like my friends Richard and Nick are basically saying is that the same thing that Dr. Cornel West said every single time: we stand with the oppressed. If you don't stand with the oppressed, then that means that you are the oppressor, because your silence is violence. And so one of the things I want to do is I deeply want to thank you, Richard Medhurst, for coming on.
Thank you.
You have a voice that is absolutely necessary, that people need to hear from, not just somebody who is from the region, but also who is not tainted by the manufacturing consent that especially you have here in the United States.
I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for inviting me on. Really, I love what you're doing. I love just the name of the show. I was immediately like, okay, this is good. What is this? I need to look up more. I need to. I knew some of you guys, but I immediately wanted to come on and perk my interest. So first of all, I love what you guys are doing. And just to echo what you said, I stand in complete solidarity with the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think everybody everywhere, as you said, we need to stand with the oppressed. Otherwise, we're doing perhaps inadvertently, but effectively helping the oppressors, and we can't have that. So everyone needs to have solidarity with the Palestinian movement, with the Black Liberation, Black Rights movement. This is an international thing, and I really like that you guys started off with the fact that this is something that goes back many decades. So maybe it's up to us to pick up the torch and keep that going. And I really think, and I really hope that we can do great things and educate more people, shed light on these issues, and uplift each other's voices. So I'm very, very grateful that you brought me on. It's truly a pleasure, and we will do this again because we can never stop saying enough about these things. So thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on because, once again, I'm a big foreign policy nerd. And one thing I noticed in the media, there's some few good channels out there, but that was an issue that the left was really, really missing. That's why we appreciate you coming on the show and spreading your voice. And
thank you.
And this is the kind of content that we want to do on our channel. So I'm really looking forward to talk to you again. I'm a big foreign policy nerd, and I would love to dive into these issues because I truly believe if you are standing for Black liberation, if you stand for defunding the police and ending the police state, but if you're not for ending U.S. imperialism, you're not being serious. And you can flip that. Yeah. If you're for ending the wars, if you're for fighting anti-imperialism, but you're not for ending the police state, you're not being serious because all the issues connect. That's all I got to say, but go ahead, JB. I've had JB already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, Nick, I know you have your show on the Fred Hampton Leftist Network, the Deeply Serious Show. I love that name.
I have a lot. I had a lot of different names. I think I got a lot of different names. So
it's a good name though. I like.
Yeah. So I'm working on. I don't know. I think you about to ask what I want to do on there.
Yeah, basically.
But I think Ron Pacone, we're working on getting him
Okay.
on next. I appreciate A1 who watched the Cornell West interview. I'm still like shocked that even happened. But anyway, just stay tuned, hit the bell, guys, because you guys know we upload every day. We had our discussion with 10 Demands and doing some police abolition theory yesterday. I know Jackie's gonna have another episode of Neurologics tomorrow, so it's very important to hit the bell and like keep your eye on the channel, because I literally already had people told me that they've been forced unsubscribed. They don't see our videos on the feed. Kalinsky and Adore did a lot of reporting on how YouTube is suppressing channels. If they supported suppressing a channel that is way bigger than us, imagine what they're doing to us who just launched last month. So that's why I'm asking you guys, if you enjoy this video, like if one person just share it to one person, like we don't need an algorithm. That's all we need. We need to build like a people powered. That's what we try to do here for Hampton Lunches. That's why we actually do that stuff, because the reality of the ground is, if you think it's hard on the big channels, imagine what it's like starting out. So if you like the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell as well, and share it too. It don't have to be a left friend. We can convert, and we can convert right wingers and centers as well.
Yeah.
So share it to a friend. Anything that helps. But I appreciate all you guys for watching. We got a lot of good stuff coming up, and thank you for coming on again, Richard.
And
Of course,
Richard,
it's my pleasure.
Yeah, where can they find you?
So my Twitter, it's Richie Medhurst, RICHIMEDHURST, and also youtube.com/Richard Medhurst and richardmedhurst.com. That's all my links. There you go.
Okay. And also look for him on Rockfin as well, because he's also there too.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining with us on FHL. I hope you all have a wonderful and beautiful Sunday.